I know we were chatting about postmodernism in the Discord, and so I have something I just want to start out with. And I posted a video of N.T. Wright. It was just a short blurb of him talking about the role of postmodernism from his point of view, and I thought this could be kind of a jumping off point. And this, I'll even tie in estuary a bit. So the quote he said was that postmodernism is announcing the doctrine of the fall to an arrogant modernity. So modernity came along and said, all right, we've got this figured out. This is the Enlightenment. We've got it figured out. It's about reason. We need everyone on board, everyone get alongside of us. If we all act in this way, we've unlocked the secrets of the universe.
I have a hunch that some of this is related to a comment you made just in passing last night, which is the grand narrative of the Enlightenment and the grand narrative of Christianity are in conflict. Can you say a little bit more about that, about how the grand narrative of the Enlightenment, you said, reached its climax in the 19th century, 18th century, and obviously Christianity in the cross. How do you see those narratives working themselves out, and how can we approach that and talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. I'm not a modern historian, and I tend to check things out with people who are, but gradually over the years I've acquired more of a sense of what was going on in European and North American philosophy, political philosophy, etc., through the 18th and 19th century. And obviously there's a lot to do with people being fed up with the wars of religion that characterized the post-Reformation world in Europe, and wanting space, wanting not to have to fight each other about precise dogmas, or at least not to use those precise dogmas as excuses for fighting each other, however you want to put that. But then simultaneously with that, you've got the rise of modern science, and you've also got, which was as cataclysmic to them as September the 11th, 2001 was for us, the Lisbon earthquake in 1755, which just posed such a sharp question to the easygoing, I don't even know what word to use, but kind of natural theology of the first half of the 18th century, where, Joseph Butler, analogy of religion and so on, the sort of sense that if this was actually a world where you could have a major earthquake on All Saints' Day when all the churches are full, so the churches are collapsing on people who ex-hypothesi are devout Christians, and then those who escape rush down to the harbour to get away from the falling buildings, and they see this great sight that the sea has fled and run away, and they wonder if it's the end of the world. And the answer is it nearly is, because it's a tsunami following the earthquake, and it comes back, and the people who are escaping from the buildings are drowned by the returning tidal wave. And easygoing, vaguely Christian Europe that had said that basically God's in his heaven and all is right with the world and it's all working out okay, suddenly faces the shock that this world is a very uncomfortable and unpredictable and unpleasant place, and how do you navigate that? And so all these things drive the separation of God and the world, so that it fuels a deism and Epicureanism, etc. But that coincides politically with what you've got going on in France with the French Revolution, which is as much an anti-Catholic as an anti-aristocratic revolution, and in America with the American Revolution, which is of course as much an anti-British revolution as it's anything else. And all these things come rushing together, and those who feel themselves to be at the cutting edge say, we are entering a new age. Have any of you read one of your own dollar bills recently? Do you know what it says on the dollar bill? Where is it?
Not worth as much as it was a while ago.
That's our currency, actually. On the back of your dollar bill, along with In God We Trust, Annuit Captis Novus Ordo Seclorum, a new order of the ages. You know where that's a quote from? Virgil. And what is Virgil talking about? The new age which is born when Augustus became emperor. Who commanded that to be put on your dollar bill? My guess is Thomas Jefferson. And hang on, is this right? It's 1876? No, so 1776.
Big year for
It kind of was, yes. So I'm told. But you know, I bear that no ill will. We have a penny coin with Britannia ruling the waves, which is a joke, because she did that a couple hundred years ago. She probably doesn't do it too much anymore, especially when our submarines collide with French submarines under the. What is that about? I mean, it's just the Atlantic Ocean's a big place. I mean, too little. Well, anyway. So, what I'm saying, and Novus Ordo Seclorum, that's one of the key markers of the Enlightenment, and it's quite literally written into your coinage, your monetary system. You know, good luck to you. And the French likewise, the sort of belief that now that we'd got universal adult suffrage, voting, everybody votes, utopia is just around the corner. And, you know, you Americans did that, and it seemed to work, and so it's why you're all so happy. And the French did it, and it hasn't seemed to work, it's why they're all so miserable. I mean, it's very, very odd. And we Brits look from the one to the other and think, what is going on here? Anyway. But that narrative says a new order of the ages, a new saeculum, a new way of being has emerged, and it's us. That's why I say it's inherently Gnostic. It's we are the enlightened ones. We have discovered the key to the world. And the imperative then is to be true to that, to live it out, to follow the dictates, the imperatives of that, whether it's the Enlightenment way of life, the American way of life, or whatever. And that becomes the master narrative that people are going through in their heads. And anything else that gets in the way is ruled out. And you can have Christian versions of that, where you fit Christianity into that. But basically what you're doing is taking those elements of Christianity that will fit and ignoring the ones that won't. So that's how it works. And that's why I say, people often say that it's because of the rise of modern science that we can't believe in the resurrection anymore. Now that's utterly, utterly ridiculous. You know, Aeschylus knew that the resurrection doesn't happen. Plato, Pliny, Homer knew that resurrection doesn't happen. Everybody knows that doesn't happen. It didn't take modern science to discover that once you bury people, they tend to stay dead. The point is that resurrection cannot be allowed within this worldview, because if Jesus really rose bodily from the dead, then that's when history turned its key corner, not in the 18th century. And so, unmasking the rhetoric of the Enlightenment, I think, is absolutely crucial. That's why postmodernity is so important. I know that there's deep suspicion among many conservative Christians in North America about postmodernity. And I want to say, some of you have heard me say this before, postmodernity is about announcing the doctrine of the fall to arrogant modernity. That was necessary, but the doctrine of the fall is never the last word. And the task of the church today could be summed up as how, granted postmodernity has been preaching the fall, not always doing it exactly accurately, but more or less, how do we now announce appropriately the doctrine of redemption, which is not a return to a chastened modernity, but a going through and out into somewhere else that we ain't got to yet. And I find that hugely exciting. What a wonderful agenda to set ourselves.
And so modernity runs this course, and I think, like Paul mentioned in one of his latest videos, is that this starts to fall apart about World War I, when and N.T. Wright mentions that there was an earthquake in Lisbon in the 1700s that really kind of set back the Enlightenment idea, because the world starts to come apart from God becomes separate from the material world, and we just are unlocking the material world with our reason and our science. And God is like a watchmaker that kind of made this really intricate, delicate machine and started it and just sort of released it. And then, but then there's these horrible catastrophes. So N.T. Wright mentions the earthquake in Lisbon, which I didn't know about, but it apparently happened on a Sunday. So everyone's in churches and the churches collapse on people. The people that run out to the outside, they notice the ocean is pulled back and then they're wondering what's going on, and well, it's a tidal wave, and the wave comes in, and whoever wasn't killed in the churches that were collapsed gets swept out to sea and drown. And then World War I comes, at the beginning of the 20th century, and basically shows that nobody understands nobody understands what we're doing, and how can this catastrophe happen? Aren't we all operating by reason? And this is Europe. This is the most reasonable, enlightened people on the earth, and they get embroiled in the bloodiest, most meaningless conflict there has ever been with all this technology they built. So then we have World War II, and we're into postmodernism as a thing into the 50s, 60s, and up into present day. So basically, modernity was arrogant and thought it could control everything and unlock the secrets of the world. Postmodernism announces the doctrine of the fall, so that no, we're all fallen. And I think this even happens. I was thinking about Freud, just the discovery that there's the unconscious, like it's just a huge blow to the whole Enlightenment project, that there's these unconscious things that are happening that can control you. And Freud tries to systematize it and try to modernize it, basically, to make it not so risky, and just be like, oh, we got to deal with this stuff. Like, let's be aware of it. Let's deal with it. Your all these drives and desires. And Jung, I think rightly, was like, no, this thing's a lot deeper than you think. And I think, and Jung predicts, has that vision that basically predicts World War I, where he has the vision of Europe being drenched in blood. And anyone at the time would be like, what are you talking about? This is the most peaceful, this is the highest point of history. How would we ever get into a war? And we still don't know why World War I started. That's one of the craziest things. We still don't really know. I mean, we know the causal factors. There's the Archduke gets assassinated and that stuff, and chain reactions happen. But it was all very, from a rationalist point of view, it was all very silly. And then the war itself was so bloody, it couldn't even be considered heroic to have died in World War I. It was an absolute catastrophe. Okay, so anyway, so postmodernism announces the doctrine of the fall to the arrogant modernity. So this gets me to my U-shaped structure I talked about. So you can picture, so this is what Pageau talks about. This is the pattern of everything. Everything has this U-shaped structure. So you have, paradise, the fall, and then the redemption. So in our example, we'll have, modernity's over here. It fell. Post-modernity is preaching to modernity. You have fallen. And that's why it's deconstruction. That's why it's fracturing. That's why it's all the negative things people say about postmodernism. It's actually just, I think it's interesting to think about it in the terms of the doctrine of the fall. Okay, so now we're at the bottom, that in my other video I called Deconstruction Valley for me personally. But as a society, the Enlightenment happened, it's fallen, we're now at the bottom. And N.T. Wright says at the end of that clip is we have to move on somehow toward redemption, because that's the story. Paradise, the fall, redemption. And the redemption, in the Christian story is always more glorious. It's a more glorious place than what was previous. So you have the garden at the beginning of the Bible, at the end of the Bible, you have the glorious city, with still more with garden around it and stuff. So if we're at the bottom of this fracturing, this delusion, where everything's divided and confused and upside down and flipping, there's a lot of Jonathan Pageau talking about things that are on the edge. And I wonder if estuary is the type, because what has to come in the middle of that to be able to enable the resurrection or the restoration or the redemption is the logos. So Christ has to come, So in terms of an estuary type situation, like if we're engaging with each other in dialogue, this is the John Vervaeke dialogos thing. We're trying to enact some sort of process that where the logos can be manifest somehow. And it's not necessarily clear how to do that. All we know is that if you one or two or three gather in his name, he'll be there. So, because you have to move forward and you can't go back to modernity. Modernity is done. The Enlightenment might be done. All the rational scientism's done. We're done with that. How do we go forward? We don't just ignore science. We're not. See, that's where Antifa and a lot of the more Marxist elements, they get it wrong. They think, everything's going down. We should just burn the whole thing down. We need to destroy absolutely everything. That's not what we need to do. Of course, I don't think there'll be much argument. We have to move forward somehow, and we got to integrate the past with the current situation and into something that's livable moving forward. Because modernity's done, but we still need it to survive for the next however long this takes. We'll need elements of modernity to get us along as we stair step this thing up. It's like at any change, there's you never like have a clean break. You're like, this was the ancient world, now we're in the modern world. The ancient world's still trickling through after the Enlightenment, and then eventually it dies off. And then, so we're in this phase where modernity is dying, and we have to figure out how to move forward. And I think we need the logos, we need Christ, and how to engage that and the only thing practically I know, or one thing practically I know what to do, is engage in discussions and talk about it, so we know how to move forward.